Well, welcome back to the leadership course. This is the 7th and final session. I think some of you will be glad it's over, and some are missing it, and I probably won't be missing it. There is a fair amount of work behind the scenes to get this going, and I do appreciate all the help from everybody that's been involved. So the jury leadership session 7, the last session that we had was the FIP commission update by Ian and a few of the delegates, and I think that went down very well. All 6 sessions are now on our website, and I think by now you know where to go on the apf.org.au/training. But for those that don't, if you have a look at the front page of the APF, you'll see support services, drop-down menu is training. And you get there, and then you'll see that each one you can just click on and view the YouTube. You can slow it down. You can go back or speed over the bits that you think you don't really need to see. So it's all there. So this session we're covering just two areas, which is the confidentiality in the jury room. This was initially going to be given by Bernie Beston, but he's actually got caught up with some other family matter that he needs to attend to. So Ian's volunteered to just jump in there and give that. So we're looking forward to that. And then I'll finish off with pretty much the role of the Secretary's assistant. So you've got a bit of an idea on how that fits into the jury room. So before we start, I was advertising the Bangladesh show, and there's a couple more that's coming up that I think we need to support. And one is CAPEX 2022, which is an FIP 1 frame. Ian McMahon's the commissioner for that. Entries close at the end of November, but let's get them in as soon as possible. There's plenty of room for more exhibits, I understand. And it helps us lift our profile, and it helps the judges to get back into entering exhibitions and working on new material. The other show, of course, is the Canberra 2022 show. It's a half national. Ian might just touch on it during his presentation. And there's a new venue. A little bit of luck, the dictator in Western Australia will let me come over in March, and if not, I think the majority of you will be able to attend that, and I think that'll be the first of the fully fledged Australian shows that'll be running. So please consider entering and attending that show. So I will now hand you over to Ian McMahon to cover confidentiality. We'll have a bit of a question time after that. I'll then carry on, and then I'll finish up the session. So over to you. Thanks, Ian.
Okay, so what I'm doing is filling in for Bernie, but it's very much Bernie's presentation, which I'll just go through. Please, this session would be best if people contribute any issues or experiences they've had, but without mentioning names, and keeping jury confidentiality in place when we have the discussion. So I'll just run through Bernie's presentation, which I haven't actually changed at all. He starts off with his background. I think we've been through this before, I think at a previous presentation, but Bernie is a native of Redcliffe, which is a city to the north of Brisbane. And he grew up there, and then was there as a solicitor for many, many years. Redcliffe is sometimes been known as Humpybong, and it was the site of the first British settlement in Queensland. But he's been an active exhibitor, national exhibitor since 1984, very active internationally, and is currently the president of BIP. So Bernie starts off by saying, well, what is confidential and what is confidentiality? And he provides a Macquarie Dictionary definition of information spoken or written in confidence, which is a typical dictionary definition, which doesn't necessarily help. But it's essentially about being entrusted with secrets, information that you shouldn't be sharing. except that human nature, when you're told something is in confidence, human nature sometimes makes it much harder for people to keep that confidence. So the FIP regulations, Australian national jurors are generally bound by the regulations and guidelines of FIP. That's effectively, we construct our national shows in the same way as FIP and FIP do. So that the same regulations bind us regardless of whether it's a national FIP or a FIP exhibition. And there is a document on the FIP website called Guidelines for the Duties and Accreditation of Jurors in FIP World and Specialised Exhibitions. And these also then definitely apply to FIAP shows, for example. They don't talk about the actual, they don't spell out a requirement for confidentiality, but they do spell out clearly what happens if it's breached. So Bernie has copied the Article 10 here about the disciplinary measures of when a juror breaks confidence. So if a juror breaks the confidentiality requirements in the middle of a jury session, the jury deliberations, then they're automatically delisted. This can happen in a number of ways. And these are all now hypothetical comments, completely hypothetical comments, but you could imagine in the days of these days of cameras and phones and Facebook, it's very easy to take a photo of a page of results and place them up on Facebook. And that would be a clear case of breaching confidentiality. But it's not just the results, it's about any of the discussion that happens in a jury that might be regarded as confidentiality. Certainly during a jury session, a jury must not reveal the medal or the points of an exhibit to anyone outside the jury team until the awards have been announced. And if you think about it for a minute, there are a number of obvious reasons for that. We go through traditionally, you know, we have one first call, second call, third call, and we have in our own juries, it's often practice that all medals up to the vermeil will be approved at a certain time, and then we'll go and have a look at the large vermeil and gold medals and large golds. So until the results are finally signed off and approved, the medals and awards are subject to change. And this certainly at FIAP and FIP exhibitions, I've personally known results to change right at the last moment before the jury results have been finalized and put in the Palmari. So, but it's also undermining the whole jury practice to reveal the results until the formal announcements have taken place. And also with the prizes, most exhibitions generally like to have the prizes announced at the Palmari's dinner, and for no one to know what those results are until the dinner. Bernie has noted here something that perhaps people may not be so much aware of. A member of a team should not discuss the points with any jurors not a member of the judging team. A team leader may do so when seeking advice of another juror. I think that this is aimed at avoiding discussions about challenges and the like without the people doing the challenge marking the results themselves. So it goes on, the regulations go on, that a juror who reveals the nature of discussions during jury sessions subsequent to the end of jury work may be delisted. And if you think about what this means, if we felt that, you know, if everyone after the jury had finished, everyone sat round and they said, oh, well, you know, Glenn Stafford over there, he said these things about your exhibit and he would have taken all 50 marks and all this sort of stuff, then people are not going to speak freely and honestly in a jury assessment. If you want to have a proper jury in a process, then people have to be able to say what they think about an exhibit, and the marks it should get, and to have a discussion. And as you all know, you've worked in a team, you might start off with one opinion that you may change, and you'll come to an agreement between everybody. If people aren't free to do that, if after the event everyone is going to chat about what everyone said or didn't say, or how the marks were arrived at, or even with the challenges, we originally gave you 85 points, but then there was this challenge from this judge over there, and we suddenly dropped by 3 points. You completely undermine the whole jury process, and people are not going to participate in it actively and honestly. So confidentiality is taken very seriously, and we frequently in discussions talk about the results being the results of the jury as a whole. And certainly you shouldn't be undermining the rest of the jury. You certainly shouldn't be undermining other members of your team by saying, well, I would have given you 87, but the team wanted to give you 83. So Bernie has included a session on confidentiality in the Jury Academy that FIP was running prior to the pandemic, and some of us have been to that. And here again, all discussions in the jury room are confidential forever. The disagreements, the discussions, the arguments and the disputes, the preliminary changes, the point changes, the medal changes. And that's basically what I've just been talking about. And the second thing, all results are confidential until officially announced. Bernie also goes on to talk about, when at the frames for critique, I think he means feedback, a juror should be very careful not to divulge any of the debate that might impinge the character of another juror. And that comes back to the comments I was just making, that the jury results are that of the jury as a whole, the team as a whole, and you shouldn't be passing on comments that have been made in the jury room. A lot of this is against human nature, and so Bernie has said this can be quite difficult, but it is very important to the integrity of the jury process that we have. If in doubt, consult the president or the jury secretary. And in this case is meant the jury secretary by the Australian or FIAP or FIP definition. Bernie's made some comments. He's had 2 experiences of breaches of confidentiality, one at FIAP, one at FIP Exhibition. He's putting the blame for this primarily at the fault of the Federation concerned for not training the judges beforehand. And Bernie has a passion for promoting a FIP jury apprentice college that is training apprentices beforehand, I guess, a bit like our judges training courses, so that people are aware of what's required of them before they come. And I've certainly, not in relation to confidentiality, but a few other things, I've certainly seen with apprentices from some countries that they haven't had a good knowledge of what's required in the jury room. And they've done things that no Australian juror would do. So discussion time, people perhaps can talk about their experiences with confidentiality, but just a reminder that you shouldn't be breaching jury confidences in the process, and perhaps the best to talk in terms of hypotheticals and generalities.
Well, I want to start the ball rolling. I've got 3 items I sort of want to discuss. One is, a lot of us have spent a lot of time being exhibitors, doing an apprenticeship to be a judge, and then judging and taking it seriously. What part of this confidential is to keep the confidence of the exhibitor with the jury process. Once the exhibitor feels the jury process is falling down, there are a bunch of arguers, they don't know what they're doing, then exhibitors stop exhibiting, and then we no longer have a jury process. So I think it's that effect of how it affects the exhibitors. And I'll give you an example. Someone might say, oh, well, I like your exhibit and everything, but Glenn Stafford said your treatment was really lousy and you need to reconsider it. Well, what does the exhibitor actually hear? He doesn't hear that Glenn Stafford hates his treatment. What he's heard is Glenn Stafford doesn't like me. And I think that then also the exhibitor goes, well, I'm not going to enter any exhibits where he's judging, you know, and the comment might have been correct. And I'm not saying that people make up stories outside the jury room, but I think it's important to understand the exhibitors don't hear exactly what you say. And I see that just to giving feedback. You know, I've actually heard someone say, you know, I said, look, the treatment needs to be changed. And here's some, oh, so you don't like me. And I'm going, at what point was this personal? Because that's how people are. And I think that's a pretty big important. The other thing is you might have a chairman that says, look, we're not going to have any 89s in here. I think that's a horrible mark to get. If you get to 89, you've got to make a decision. It's got to go up or down. Now, if that gets out to the exhibitor saying, oh, you got 89, but they all put you down to 88. What does the exhibitor think? Well, why didn't it go to 90? So I think it's just those little comments that are quite crucial to the jury process. And I think if we just stick to, you know, just talking in generalities, talking about the exhibitors, how you can help them, and don't talk about anything in the jury room, I think the exhibitor is going to benefit as much as the jury process. So that's pretty much my 3 words on that. Thanks, Eve.
I've got something to say. I was at a group of jurors. I was someone who had an exhibit in a competition, and I asked for one of the jurors to give some feedback on my exhibit, and the person said, "Well, I'm not really a juror in the class that you exhibited." And I thought, well,
common.
What does that mean? And I just felt rather uncomfortable about the whole thing. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I suppose they're being honest, but why couldn't they? Why did they have to give me somebody who wasn't knowledgeable about the area in which I'd exhibited? No comment.
It's quite common that happens.
Why is it common? I mean, it's not not a very good thing to do. Why does it happen?
Well, it could be that the person who was the expert who could have given you feedback was at another meeting somewhere else, didn't attend the feedback sessions for exhibitors. It mightn't happen much in Australia, but it happens quite often overseas, where people are at a lunchtime dinner or they're at another event when there should be feedback.
Well, I don't think it's very professional.
Yeah.
I mean, but at least he said he told the truth. But I don't see why a person that was running that particular group hadn't chose someone to do that. You know, it's not a very good idea. And here we are looking at things that are best to do, not things that are worse to do.
But I agree with Charles. The people's availability in Finlandia, the chairman of the team judging one of the classes had to go to a FIPA meeting at the same time as the critique or the feedback session for the exhibitors, and Jenny was asked it's open class, asked to give comments to exhibitors at the frames. I mean, she'd just got a large goal, but it's still, you know, these things happen.
Well, I don't know whether they should happen or not, but that's my view. Because, you know, these people are paid to be on the jury, not rushing off to other meetings every 5 minutes.
I think one of the problems with confidentiality is probably inadvertent loss of confidentiality, and that can happen very easily when the jury teams are out working on the frames. We all know that quite a bit of the judging takes place when the exhibition is open to the public. And if jurors are having a discussion about a particular exhibit, which they are likely to be doing, then it may be overheard, maybe by the exhibitor or maybe by someone else, and then that person talks to another person who talks to another person. And I think that's where quite a bit of the problems arise with regard to confidentiality, not a result of what happens in the jury room, but as a result of what can happen at the frames.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, Jeff, because even I try to just have a look underneath the frames to see if anyone's, covertly standing there trying to listen in. And if they are, then I'll just duck my head and say, look, we need to have a private. Do you mind just having a look at another exhibit? Very politely ask them to move on. And sometimes it's a friend trying to do the right thing by standing around. So I think you're right. We get about a day in private to judge, but a lot of the time it's when the exhibition's open. Normally at the beginning, everyone rushes to the dealers, so we got a bit of time there. But once the dealers are finished, they pretty much all come around and if they can see a judging team. And I think the hardest one is when we all rush out to all the large golds because someone's going to be nominated for the grand award and have a speak on it, and then we're all discussing it. And I think that makes it a little bit obvious to people that they're a contender for the grand award. So you're right, inadvertent. It's not deliberate by us, but it can happen.
Jeff, it's a good point. I think another time when you've got to be careful, and I think it's the role of the jury secretary or the chairman of the jury, is when you're having a lunch during the middle of the judging. And I've been involved in cases where the exhibitors are helping set up frames or doing things, and they're coming in for their lunch as well, and they're sitting at the table next to the judging team who are obviously trying to take the time to discuss particular exhibits. And you've got to be on your guard for not only when you're judging at the frames, but when you're socialising or just having your lunch. You've got to be careful. And some exhibitors deliberately do it, sit around listening to the judges and they're having their conversations.
In that context, sometimes people can accidentally leave their notes or whatever lying around and leave them behind at the coffee table. Or I know as secretary, I've found a few of these over the years, retrieve them. So you do need to be careful.
Something which is related to this, the awards and the voting are confidential of the individuals. The awards and voting of individuals are confidential within the jury room. Now, at Stockholmia, all the judges voted and they played the who voted for which exhibit at the Palmares. It was all up on the screen. Is that sort of, it's not confidentiality, but it's similar to it. Is that a good idea?
A secret ballot.
No, it wasn't a secret ballot. It was the picture of the person and how they voted was actually displayed on the screen at the Palmares.
Yeah, my comment really was that it should be a secret ballot.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that there's anything in the regulations that says anything about that, is there?
Can I speak? I was at the Stockholmia. It's not an FIP exhibition, so whether FIP rules applied. Now, each judge had, I think, 5 preferences of the candidates. So it's one candidate from each class, and it was quite obvious that quite a few judges worked out the 2 real chances are X and Y. They favoured X. They put X as first, and then put Y as last. So there was a lot of strategy as well. So I think it was interesting. They were trying something quite different, but there's a lot of faults with it. and confidentiality is one, but there was really people playing strategy. They wanted to favour somebody. So anyway.
Yeah. And I think it also can backfire if all the votes went to one and not the other, because even when I've been counting votes in a Palmyras, I'm very sensitive that if you can see it's all going one way, that you create another pile of that same person. So at least the person that loses doesn't think that nobody voted for it. And, you know, I think that's part of the confidential. Yes, they won. They are the outright winners, but they at least got one vote, because typically someone has to talk on it. And if they don't get that, then, you know, you think, well, why were they even in the race? You know, so I think there's a lot of areas that we need to be sensitive to a little bit. And the other thing I don't like is the poor guy that doesn't win just wanders off the stage. No one congratulates him or anything. They all congratulate the grand awardee. And I always feel sorry for that person stuck up on stage.
I think that the Stockholm meeting was interesting, to say the least. But we must remember at the end of the day that it was a club competition. It wasn't a national exhibition or an international exhibition. It was a Royal Philatelic Society London exhibition.
But it had FIP recognition.
No, it had FIP judges. It didn't have FIP recognition.
Yes, the results were accepted.
Well, that's news to me. I'm very glad to hear that, because I got a large gold.
I never knew that that was recognised either, so that's news to me. So,
no, I think
agree with you, Lindsay.
They were accepted as qualifying. They were not regarded as FIP results.
All right, well, we might carry on with the second session, and if there's any more that needs to be discussed on this, we can do that.
And then put in an envelope. Huh?
No. The votes for the Grand Prix, they're done in the room,
yeah,
and put in an envelope. But they're not counted until the Palmares.
All right, so the second part of this is the role of the Secretary's Assistant. And I thought I might start with, you know, how this all came about in Australia. And in Australia, we developed many years ago a software package called Showman. It was developed by Hans Carman, and I believe Bernard Doherty put a lot of input into it. And the concept behind Showman was to be developed and to be used at national exhibitions at no charge. So it was developed in-house, and it was given to each of the organising committees to use for each of those. The data contained in Showman was both private and confidential. So it developed a database of everybody's exhibits, etc. And they were to be used solely in the jury room, comparing medal levels, etc., with previous exhibits, but not something that was then, sent out to the rest of the world. It was stored on a program called Microsoft Access 2007. While Microsoft is this huge organization, not a lot of people are familiar with Access, but Hans Carman was a bit of an expert on that, and he was able to facilitate a lot of programming in there, and it really did help in the beginning all the exhibitions. It even had the ability that if we had an accord exhibition and there were some results, or international exhibitions could be entered into there as well, so that might help the jury along the track on whether their medal levels were correct or not correct. And then they were consolidated and they were coded so people couldn't get access to them. Showman did require a bit of maintenance, and so it actually needed some updating in certain circumstances. Microsoft's great at putting new patches and new abilities in, so that needed to be changed. Also, the APF regulations, which we follow the FIP rules, plus we've got APF classes, some of those rules might change, and that needs to be incorporated into it. So there was quite a bit of work involved with Showman, and then we had to run courses conducted with with how to operate showmen. So in a lot of national juries, you had a person solely there for running showmen. Now, those operators did require a bit of skill. They really did have to have some experience with Microsoft Access. It wasn't one of those things that you could just use straight off and there it is a relational database. So unless you get your head around the concept, it became quite difficult. One of the things that we find is the documentation wasn't perfect for this, and the handover always was a little bit difficult too. So the operators just really had to have a good feel for Access and had some experience with showmen before they could run it. So some of the problems that we had with showmen towards the end was Microsoft Access was no longer available or updated, that particular 2007. And also the database was excellent, and that was the best part of showmen. However, most shows found the back end, i.e. printing certificates or doing the Power Morris document, was very difficult, and it was locked down so tight you couldn't change anything. So for instance, it might have printed your certificate and you may have a New Zealand exhibit, and on the certificate would be, you know, Penny Universal's new, and then the word Zealand underneath, and you had no way of tidying that up so when the person got their certificate. So there was a few areas that really started to concern some of the exhibitions, and so the APF started to look at what sort of solutions that we could do. So we decided we would have a look at an alternative, and that's running the result part of the exhibition through an Excel spreadsheet. Something that was easy to upgrade to. If Microsoft changed their Excel to a different version, it was one of those things that would be easily upgradable to. And we thought we'd have the exhibition database as a separate entity in itself. So we could then feed the exhibition results into the database, we could pull stuff out, but we didn't join the two together. So it was decided that Johanna, who had some experience with spreadsheets, would do the Excel side, and that Peter Allen would look into developing the database. So how did this come about that Joe got volunteered? I would have to say volunteered, because Gary Brown just said she needs to do it because she knows what she's doing. So that's how it really happened. But what happened, we were going to run Melbourne 2017, and because it was a FIAP, they normally have assistant secretary inputting stuff into a spreadsheet. And so they asked Joe to go to Nanning in 2016 and be a trainee, and she spent some time with Jasmine inputting the data. And the first thing that she saw was everything was done with a calculator. The agents would sit there and put all the results and all the different columns in a spreadsheet, and then they'd sit there with their calculators and total it up and then put the results in. So she thought, well, why don't you just sum it? So there was a few things that she had on her mind after doing that. So she improved that spreadsheet to be used for Melbourne 2017, and she ran a lot of macros, etc. And that sort of gave us a good feel that there was a way of doing that. So after Melbourne, the APF did ask her to say, could she develop something at national level that we could use? So not only did she do it for national level, she did it for FIAP and FIP. Mr. Tay had a look at it at one of the exhibitions, said this is a great idea, and next time I was on a FIP jury, there it was, no recognition from Australia or Joe. It was just now the new way of doing things. So basically, in developing this, we wanted to include that it had a spreadsheet that we could easily input the data to. It had to be able to do a whole series of mail merges, so we could then produce a whole range of stuff, and I'll quickly go over that. And we've got to be able to train people on it, and we need some documentation, because that was the problem with showmen. It was coming to end of life and it wasn't being handed over, and people weren't being trained properly, and there was no real good documentation on it. So that was one of the issues that we needed to have a look at. So the history of, again, Exhibition 8, it started in Melbourne 2017. We run it down in Bunbury as a one-frame exhibition. We've run it here at state level at Western Australia. We did run it in Sydney in 2019. It was very successful there. Again, we ran another state show. We ran it here. We did run it in Canberra 2020 before COVID. And that was the first time we started training Exhibition 8 operators. And we passed our very first operator in Canberra. We used it in AusVPEX, the one framer, and just recently we've used it at Toowoomba. Now Toowoomba was basically remote training because Jo couldn't go over to Toowoomba to help them set it up, so she did it via phone and FaceTime and remoting in. So it was quite an interesting exercise, and it is possible. But of course, training face-to-face is the way to go about that. So how many versions are there? Well, there's a state version, which we use here in WA, and it's freely available for people that want to use it in their state. There's a dedicated one-frame program. There's a national program for both fulls and part exhibitions. And of course, there's the FIAT 1. The FIAT 1 we will use here in Melbourne again, hopefully in 2022. And I still believe the FIAT 1's been used at various places. So just to give you an idea, this is just the master spreadsheet that the information gets put into, and I'll break it down a little bit. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a series of tabs where other information goes on. If you've got you know, 900, 1,000 frames, it becomes quite a large spreadsheet, but it's still easy enough to import all the data. So you can see on the second tab, all the jurors need to go on. So that way we can work out what the jury teams are, and they can be put on the critique forms or the feedback forms so they know who each of the jury is. The team leaders need to be input in there. And as you can see, there's explanation on where these fit in, particularly for mail merge. So why do you need to put the chairman's name in there? Because on the certificate, they need to sign for it. So, you know, that one field gets used probably in 20 places. So it's important that all these things get updated. Again, there's a whole heap of awards. You can see there's another tab, and then you have best in show runner-up. All those things need to be decided before and inputted. And they can be then merged onto the certificate. So not only, you know, will you get your large gold traditional, if you're best in show, it'll say on the certificate that you're best in show. And so it's a nice way to get all that information on everything. Of course, we have accord countries as well, so we like to know what state each of the exhibitors from. So we put in the state, and if we've got accord judges and accord entries, we'll put those in there as well. So we have that, and the most important thing is, once the show is finished, is to actually be able to send this results to the database that Pete Allen's developing, and also for us to put a simplified version on the website, because a lot of people, the only time they know what their results are is when they see it up on the website, and you know, they send their families to it. So that's all part of the master spreadsheet. So what needs to be done? So this is what the role of the assistant secretary really is. So there's a whole heap of stuff that needs to be done before the exhibition. So the organising committee are going to organise their logo. So there's a very important thing to send to the assistant secretary to say, look, here's our logo, we'd like it on everything in there. They need to determine what the classes that they're going to have, and all those classes need to be inputted. Then, as all the entry forms come in, that all goes there, and that gets inputted by the assistant secretary, and that's including name, the class, the 50 to 200 word title. So a lot of inputting, but all on the master sheet. From there, you need to generate cover sheets if you want to send A4 cover sheets for people to use their own envelopes, if you're not printing them yourselves. If you're printing them yourselves, then you'll want labels to go on those envelopes. So either way, you need to get those cover sheets in there. Then you need to generate a catalogue. So it'll generate a catalogue entries, and you can do it by class, by surname, by whatever you want to sort with, we can do that. And then to help the bin room, we need to generate a bin room list. We need receipts and tracking forms, and we need a whole range of labels to go on all the boxes to make the bin room. So here's just an example of what you can get from the master sheet to go into your catalogue, which gets printed before the show, so it's ready for everyone at the show. And you can see on the left-hand side, it was at the Canberra show, that was the A4 sheet that got emailed to everyone who was in entry, or to be printed for those that needed. And you can see on the right-hand side, here's a bin room list. So the bin room has in frame order all the exhibits, so they know they can put all their boxes in frame orders, etc. Then they need a bin room receipt and tracking form. So, you know, when you hand in your exhibit, you know, you sign that you've handed in, they sign that they've taken it, and then that's tracked. You sign just if you're mounting, that all gets done on that tracking form. And on the right-hand side, it's just examples of labels that get put on the boxes. So the exhibits, and then the envelopes, once the exhibits are mounted, get put back into those. So as you can see, the program does have a lot of things that it can generate. Now, while in the jury room, there's a whole range of stuff. So of course, the judging sheets, which is the most important things, need to be printed out and handed out to all the team leaders. The feedback sheets blank, which normally gets handed out on a USB stick, and for those that are using their laptops to type the feedback on, so that needs to be done. Of course, the major share of being in the jury room is inputting all the results. So all the results get put in, and because it automatically tallies it up, it's amazing how much error that mental arithmetic is found out in the jury room, because someone's gone and added it up and it's 90 and it's a gold. And then it's gone back and they said, look, you know, the actual spreadsheet says it's 88. Do you need to change your results, or do we need to change the input? So it's a way of cross-checking what's going on. Of course, during the jury room, as the results are coming in, team leaders are signing off on the A3 sheets of paper which go on the walls. It allows all the jurors to go up and track how exhibits are going. And if they think there's something they're not happy with, you know, approach their team leader and then you know, do a friendly challenge. Just say, look, you know, there might be something we need to look into here. And because then the next thing is, if anything does get changed, that needs to be recorded and put into the spreadsheet as well. Once all those are done and dusted and we're happy with all the results and we're heading off to the pub, then all those critique forms with all the results, all the comment sheets need to be put in and got ready for the bin room. All the certificates need to be printed. And there's a little comment, please don't see the assistant secretary as the person to rush around and go and get your coffee, because at the end of the day, there's no time for that. And of course, one of the other roles is, particularly in the jury, is training other assistant secretaries. So it's a real full-time, flat-out position. And if you want your exhibition to go smoothly on this, you know, supporting the assistant secretary rather than demanding is a very useful way of going about things. So during the exhibition, these are the type of blank forms, and you can see how nice it looks. If you've got a show logo, why not put it on all documentation? You know, I think it does look very professional. So as you can see, you walk out, you're going to do your judging, you've got the title of the exhibit, you've got the brief that they've got, that's all been put on there. You're reminded on what all the medal levels are, and then you pencil in your results, and the team leader hands in a set to the assistant secretary on a regular basis. As you can see on the right hand side, you'll get a blank form, which is basically just the top part. Then your asked, or someone in your team will type up the feedback. Here in Australia, we recommend, you know, for people that are silver, large silver vermeil, to get involved with our One Up Club. So there's just a tick box that all you need to do is tick that, and that just prompts the person to have a look. And because we've got a web address there for the One Up Club, if people want to know what that's about. Again, during the exhibition, At the end, once the results are all known, they get typed in and printed up, they get printed, the certificate gets printed, and then that all gets transferred to the bin room to add to all the exhibits when they're pulled down and put back into the envelope. So for the Palmares, of course, this document typically has to be done well before the Palmares, which is normally on a Saturday night. You might be going down to Office Works and you might have a deadline. It's all got to be done by 5 o'clock. So you need to get the results out for the Palmares. Typically you have it by entry number and by exhibition surnames, because the exhibitors, the first thing they do is look up their name to see what their result is. They don't go exhibit by exhibit to see what everyone else has got. And there's one thing that we've started to do is to have results by descending order to stop all the we need to arrange all the medals in order so we can get all the large golds up first, and whose have we got and who's available. So that's another item that can be produced from this master spreadsheet. Just again, so you can see for the Palmares, recorded by class type or recorded by surname. Whatever you want in the Palmares, just give the secretary a heads up more than just 24 hours before, so they can run their macros and be ready for it. The moment that last result's out, they can spit these out to then head off to the printers. So after the exhibition, then we need to get the spreadsheet over to Peter Allen, in this case, to get up on the website. We like to get them up as quick as we can, and also the result to go to the database. So this is typically what we'll send to Pete, but maybe not the breakdown scores. It'll be just the scores with the medal levels and the name, so that he'll just hide all the columns that he doesn't require. So training and support. So this is a bit of a slowdown when it comes to COVID, because we started this in Canberra in 2020. We need to pick it up again, hopefully in Canberra and then Newcastle, and start training new assistant secretaries. I think our aim is to get someone capable in each state to be able to assist in this area. And I think it's up to the jury chair and secretary to identify people that are suitable for training. I mean, they know people in their state. They know who might want to put their hand up. Should it be someone that's a judge? It would be nice, but it's not essential. Should it be someone to at least an exhibitor? I think that would be the minimum requirement. They at least understand the process, and if they're an exhibitor, that would be good. But if there's someone that can handle Excel spreadsheet, you know, a son or daughter of an exhibitor or a judge, then that may be a suitable person as well. Of course, their training manuals are being produced, and I've never heard so much swearing as producing a training manual in my life. And Joe's gone and produced 3, and they're ongoing, updated. Every time someone has a question that's not covered in the manual, she could go back and update it. The APF user guide for XA, it's about 80 pages at the moment. She's got a short version for those people that don't need cut and paste pictures of step-by-step how to do things. And of course, the main one is the technical guide, that if someone other than the people that are trained need to be able to reprogram it or change a macro or do something, how is that done? So as long as you've got a minimum requirement of understanding Excel spreadsheet, you could go through the technical guide and generate your own macros and do your own mail merges, etc. So this is just the covers of the user guide for Exhibition Aid, and of course the user short guide for the Exhibition Aid, and it's not for short assistant secretaries, it's just non-pictures, and then the technical guide for Exhibition Aid as well. So that's just touch a little bit on it. I'm happy to answer questions. It's not really any training, it's just to make the chair and secretary aware of the role and what's involved, and to get the most out of the program that we've developed for national exhibitions. Just before anyone asks any questions, I want to thank everyone for coming along to these sessions. It's been fantastic. I think I've got a lot out of putting it together. Two more housekeeping. I do plan on sending everyone a survey, which I'd like you to fill out and bring back. Might ask you questions about, you know, how do you rate the speakers? What type of things you might want to see in the future that might be useful for a juror, exhibitor, or a collector. And then once that's done, I'll email everyone a certificate of attendance, so you can put in your CV that you attended this and thank you for participating in all these. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the Assistant Secretary or anything that Ian's covered or anything generally over the last 7 sessions.
I've got a quick comment, Glenn. Like several other people, I take the American Exhibitors magazine, and I think it would be very useful if a short write-up went to them saying that this was available on the website, because that's a whole series of stuff, and I think they'd probably appreciate that, actually, and possibly a short kind of page or so article to go with it would be the way to go.
I think, Glenn, you could write something for Fiat News as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you wish.
Did you say you're giving it away for free?
Well, we're not charging. National exhibitions get it. That's why the APF has developed it.
But if you go internationally?
Well, it's gone internationally without us actually giving it internationally.
Yeah,
you know, because all you need is just a copy
typical
of the previous
Australia
one.
and its scientific development.
Yeah.
Just give it away overseas.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look,
if you're going to make it available for other organisations in other countries, then, you know, think about having a charge on it. APF could probably do with the money, as could the stamp societies around Australia could then tap into some of the APF money.
I think the biggest issue is not the program itself, but it requires a bit of training. And I think if a country or someone, they're going to have to spend the money to get that person trained. If it's an accord country, then they could send their accord judge over and someone else, and we could train them in a jury session. It really is hands-on training as you're going along, before, during, and after the show. So if you want to know how the training goes, Linda Weldon's our first person that's passed the training and done very well. Jeff Gunston's the guy from Queensland that's done the remote training, but I'm still going to recommend that maybe for Newcastle that he comes into the jury and follows up with Joe to really get on top of it. But we're still going to require people from all the other states to learn the system as well, because unfortunately, even our volunteers are aging, so I can't guarantee that whoever we train is going to last 20 or 30 years, which would be optimal.
Can I just ask, WA going to let Johanna out of WA?
No, I'm hoping we're both going to come over for March, but yeah.
Let me ask you my comments about writing it up and letting the American exhibitors know. Wasn't about the program itself. It was about really all the background training and which are obviously on the web.
Yep. Yeah, I think, and that's probably the same article we could produce for Fiat News as well.
Yeah, sure.
One thing, Glenn, Showman used to produce previous results for an exhibit. Yeah. Now, and there is a danger of that, of getting the results to the right person. There was a case in Australia where there was a John Wilson exhibited, and the results of a John Wilson were given to the jury as previous results, and there was quite a big difference. But they were for the wrong person, because the second John Wilson, or the later one, used to exhibit either as John Wilson or D. John Wilson. And in this particular exhibition, he exhibited as John Wilson, and they got mixed up with another John Wilson. One was from Timaru and the other was from Christchurch. Similar subject, but the results were totally different. So have you got a means of ensuring that you get the right person if there's some names are similar?
If Joe had a way, everyone would have an ID. We'd barcode your forehead and you would scan that first to guarantee. Look, we do our best to keep the data confidential and to be the correct person. And if you've seen entry forms and you say, look, if you've got an ID number, put it in, they don't do that. If you've used different names before, please put it in, they don't do that. And sometimes you're lucky that they actually put their names on and they just send in a half filled out form and a check. So, you know, it can be a nightmare. So, but I understand your point. That is a database entry issue. How do we check that?
I can add something to that, Glenn, perhaps.
Yeah, please do.
I'm trying to redevelop the database, which is quite separate to what Joanna does. The database is the record of exhibitions and results. And one thing I have on my list is to give each exhibitor a number similar to a FIP number. So there'd be an exhibitor record which would have what we know about them, their name, address and email, and they would also be given a number. So how we use that, I'm not quite sure, but each exhibitor would be given their number and we would have a means of reconciling, I think, people with results through the unique ID that they would have.
I think you'll have a real problem with using unique IDs. It's a Privacy Act issue. Certainly in New Zealand it is.
Yeah, look, I'm quite familiar with the Australian Privacy Act through my previous employment. And I do think there are ways around that, but I won't get into privacy, I think, in this discussion, but the whole area of privacy and our database does need to be thought through. So
I agree.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat. Yeah.
Won't go down that rabbit hole just here, but I understand the issues to some extent here.
Can I just ask if when you're talking about IDs, I mean, you know, a lot of the organisations I belong to have membership numbers. Yeah. So, and you know, we don't have a membership number that I'm aware of, do we, Ian? There's the Canberra Philatelic Society. It's the Philatelic Society of Canberra.
Once upon a time, we probably did, but we certainly don't now.
So, I mean, that's one way of actually, I would have thought, looking at it, is to issue all your members with a membership number.
Yes. And a lot of American societies do. I could probably tell you what my number for the UPSS was, but not many others.
It's the matching of those numbers that is the issue.
That's right.
And that's where Peter is probably commenting about too. He's probably more familiar than I, but there are some real issues with matching personal IDs. That's where, you know, creating new identification numbers becomes a real issue.
But as Glenn said, half the time people don't put their, for example, if it's a FIP exhibition, they don't put their FIP numbers in.
So just a comment. I think most people here probably know what a FIP number is, but for those who don't, FIP allocates a number to every exhibitor at a FIP show who gets more than a May.
No, everybody that enters.
Everybody who enters, okay.
Not one frame, I don't think.
But not one framers. No, one framers are not on the list. I have a list of current FIP exhibitors, that is those who currently have active FIP exhibits. And I can provide you with your FIP number if you're on that list. Or in some cases, if you were on that list in the past, but you now are not on it. If you haven't exhibited at FIP level before, you won't have one until such time as you have exhibited. And certainly the list I have doesn't include one framers. And Bob would have a similar list for New Zealand.
Yep, indeed I do.
I just won't go into too much, but any access database, every data table usually has an ID.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how the whole thing works. The IDs connect to each other. So at the moment, all the results up to 2018 for Australia are in access, and each exhibitor does have a unique ID, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, it's how you use that information.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the other thing about it, Glenn, is the fact that we have had a secretary for our exhibitions, which is what you would call an assistant secretary, and that's Lee Gravestock. She's developed her own package for managing these things, because we've got our own classes and stuff like that. And it sounds to me as though much of what you're doing with XAid is very much what she has developed. I would certainly like to see if we could actually, just do a double check to make sure that we are not unnecessarily duplicating stuff, or making sure that our system could actually work. One thing I'm not sure of, Jeff, and I'm asking you now, Jeff, did Jenny actually have a system like that for NZ 2020? Or did she have her own system?
Yes, but it was a very simple one, because for 2020, it dropped from being an international to just being a national exhibition. Yeah. So it was just a simple spreadsheet that was developed on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the other interesting things, as the secretary of NZ 2020, I provided for Joe, who was trying to do the database as the secretary, with the format I required for the certificates that were being produced. And that's just one of the things that I'm sure is built into the program, so that, each individual organising committee can set up their own certificate. And as long as they've got the field set up, the system can actually feed the information in to the area on the exhibition, on the certificate that is required. So it's a great system, from that point of view.
So Glenn, could I say something about Canberra?
Yep, please, go ahead.
So it's starting to look, if the plans of the New South Wales Premier and the Victorian Premier and perhaps the Prime Minister come to fruition, and the ACT Chief Minister decides he's going to go along with all of this, that Canberra could in fact be a face-to-face exhibition without any real restrictions. Obviously, we won't know exactly what restrictions might apply in March, and the current restrictions are about to change on Friday in Canberra, and we might even be allowed to have New South Wales people in. And sometime soon we might be able to go to Sydney, but it is starting to look as things are changing. International travel has been highlighted. So now is the time to enter Canberra. It does close on the 30th of November, but like CAPEX, we would appreciate the entries earlier than that. We would love entries from New Zealand. And there is a commissioner. If they can't come, we'll do what was planned for RoyalPEC. And we'll make the same arrangements for WA if we have to, but we're hoping that they can come too. So the classes are, well, postal history is the main class, but it also includes Aero, Astro, postal stationery, revenues, postcards, and youth. Literature definitely. So we'd love to know more about Tasmanian postal stationery in Canberra. So please do enter, but also please encourage any exhibitors you know in your state and your hometown. And it's an online entry form, so you just have to go to our website, and the link is on the exhibition page. And it's canberrastamps.org.au is the website, easy to remember. And yes, and we'd love to see you all there, subject to our, what happens next year, but certainly things seem to be opening up. Canberra is well over 90%, well, certainly about 90% vaccinated for people over age 12 at the moment. And soon we should start to open up to Sydney and Melbourne.
I've no doubt that many of us would like to come to Canberra. The problem is getting back into New Zealand.
Well, you could spend time in Canberra. You could go on a road trip around, not so much around the ACT, because that wouldn't take you very long. But
the waiting list is 30,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
3,000 places in hotels available. I don't know, it's every week or fortnight, and 30,000 people wanting them.
Yeah, 30,000 people on the waiting list to get into.
So there's probably 30 or 40,000 Australians wanting to come back overseas, so they'll start coming back into Sydney, I think.
Our government's making announcements of changes tomorrow, so we'll wait and see what happens there.
Yeah. On that point about electronic application forms, does that get automatically fed into XAid or not?
Not
No.
yet. No.
Right. Okay.
But what will happen with the Canberra ones, and I haven't discussed it with Johanna yet, is that it's readily convertible into a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
And the spreadsheet can be sent to Johanna, and she may be able to make good use of that.
I'm sure she would. Yeah.
So she should be able to take that and put it in her own. You know, she'd have to adjust. They have to adjust the, you know, the columns and the titles and things to what she does. But
it would be possible to line up the entry form with the fields on XAid. And with the electronic entry form, you can pull all the data into a database that's immediately transferable into an Excel spreadsheet.
That's what I would have thought, Peter. One of the interesting things about CAPEX is that they've limited the text for the description of the exhibit 200 characters.
Oh.
Which is quite interesting. It really does limit what you can say.
Count up the characters in your title.
Including, that of course includes spaces and full stops and all the rest of it, you know.
So Canberra online entry form's not quite that sophisticated, but it is easily transferable with a little bit of a manual twist into an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking about a PDF-based electronic entry form, not a web-based form. So
we did think about the PDF one as well, but people seem to have problems with it for some reason I don't understand. But
it only works if you've got Adobe Acrobat Reader when you're processing the form, and not everybody uses Adobe Acrobat Reader for processing PDFs. I think last time we tried it, we got about 80%.
Yeah, I think
the forms were okay, and the other 20% had to be retyped.
And a lot of the web browsers default now to opening within the web browser rather than opening Adobe Reader, which is what they used to.
Exactly, you've got to make people download. Yeah.
And sometimes they make it so hard that you've actually got to download it first and then force it to open.
What you've got to do.
PDF. In Acrobat.
The interesting thing about that, of course, though, is that it's really showing the direction of where it's all heading, in the sense that the exhibitor will be able to enter the information and it should be fed straight into the database, or whatever information is required. The only problem with that, of course, is that if you've got an international exhibition, well, probably even if you've just got an Australian or a New Zealand one, the people who can't actually type properly and have got grammatical errors and things like that. So you still have to have a manual input into the process to make sure.
How that with the Canberra entries that we have, there are a couple where they're just typos. So you know, we're talking about data entry before. It's only as good as the data you get.
Oh, exactly.
Put in.
Giga, I think
and
they
you'll
call
still
it,
have typos. IBRA was using a PDF form, and before it got postponed, I had some entries and there were some issues. They were using a PDF form. Not everyone was finding that easy.
And I think we know that people don't fill out all the forms. So unless you make the forms unsubmittable until every item is filled in, and you also make them drop down menus, because you put in class, someone will put in 2, someone will put PS, someone will put O. Is that 0, or is that O for open, or is that O for other, or is that O for one frame? Like, you expect people to read the prospectus and put the right class information. And in fact, when you see some of them, they're dyslexic because they put 8 in the class and 2 in the amount of frames, when we know it's an 8-framer and it's postal history, but they've just got the numbers around the wrong way, you know. So I think drop-down menus, mandatory fields is the only way you're going to solve, and that's not a, well, I don't believe that's just a simple form that you can put together. I mean, there's a lot of thought that needs to be done.
Just one framer, so that makes it quite, that reduces one of the issues.
But no matter how hard you try, people are ingenious. They'll come up with some other way of corrupting your data.
You can do everything Glenn was talking about with a PDF form. You know, drop downs and mandatory fields. And then some people just give up and they print it out and handwrite it and email it to you.
And I think we've got to accept that that will happen. And, you know, we'd rather have them as an exhibitor than not. And so you've got to accept that those sorts of things will happen.
But we did this for AusVipex, and as I said, we got of the, I can't remember, 80 or 90 entries or something. We had 80% the forms were fine. The data transferred into an Excel spreadsheet with about 3 clicks.
Yep.
And 20% we had to deal with them by hand, but we were still well ahead.
Couldn't agree more.
You'll never change that. You'll always have the 80-20 rule.
Exactly right.
Pareto principle, yeah.
For Finlandia 2017, the entry forms had to be submitted electronically, and in our case, they went to London, who then forwarded them on to Finland. And I think Jeff and Jenny Long did the same via Australia.
Why? Why?
Oh, because they were members of the. Oh no, we won't go
There's
down
no
that.
New Zealand
Another
commissioner.
issue. Yeah.
So carried by the Australian commissioner.
Oh, well, very good.
So if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to stop recording and let people just have a general chat.